switch to a different angle so that the get a better perspective of what the hell's going on here. I'm going to switch to pen. Let's see. One of the funny things about these pens, it's like, well, I've never driven a Corvette, but I would imagine it's like driving a Corvette with a quart jar for a gas tank. One of the reasons I switched from brush to pen is that the brush works excellently for larger areas, like in this area right in here, where you can move quickly. But if you're working in tight little areas like that, the brush ends up becoming a liability because let's see, how do I explain this? So with fuel injectors in cars, there's something called duty cycle. So that when the computer says to fire, there is a window when the injector opens and then closes. And that period from when it starts the mechanical process of opening and completes the mechanical process of closing, because it's a electronic solenoid opening, forcing the needle open and then closing. The same thing with the pen or the brush is that if you're going from point A to point B, the slower you go, the more ink you're going to put down. So with the brush or with a pen, obviously provided at different points and different circumstances, a comparable pen that's comparable to the brush would produce a thicker line if you go slower than if you went faster. And if you went too fast, the flow from the pen can't keep up with the distance traveled by the pen, if that makes any sense. And anyway, in this small little detailed stuff, the brush would not be necessarily practical. So, going with Mr. Pen. Mr. Pen's happy because Mr. Pen's been ignored. Spend too much time using the brush. So Mr. Pen just gets ignored and it sits and collects dust and rust and all sorts of things that prevent it from operating properly. The other thing too with this page in particular, so this page with the cross shape in the center is going to mirror page 2, and for quite a while I kind of ignored this section and worked on this and worked on that and worked on Mr. Guy who got stabbed. And there's a panel behind him and a panel behind his left foot. So I drew in a face of one of the guys working on the ship because that stayed blank. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with that. It seemed kind of pointless and pedantic to have another space field of stars and another space field of stars. And with this, the biggest idea would be, since this is kind of a tangent that runs the length of the page down, is to have something intersects this line to kind of give it some interest. And well, what do you put there? I could put another floating frozen spaceman, or considering it's moving from spaceman floating in space to guys repairing the ship, it would make sense to have guys in the process of working on the ship. There was a interview by Bill interview of not by interview of Bill Watterson in the Star Tribune, one of the Twin Cities' wonderful rags, and it was him talking about how, well, it was in context with the Sunday Funnies, but in the composition of the pages themselves. And he recounted his issue with the editors of the newspapers who were taking on his strip, that they wanted him to be like Peanuts, which is square, 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 square. And he wanted to go on to, do dynamic pages where one whole section that Calvin and Hobbes is supposed to fill on the Sundays was just one panel, or it was one large panel with panels inside there. And, some newspapers didn't want that because they would trim down or scale down certain cartoons in the Sundays for whatever editorial purposes they needed. And I kind of carry on with that attitude with this is the square, 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 full page, square, 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 full page. It seems kind of, I don't know. Then again, if the images are exciting and the story is engaging, then it wouldn't matter if it was some overly complicated series of panels on one page or just regular squares in sequence. It would be engaging and exciting, no less. So, perhaps departing from conventional square panels on a page is just compensating. It's like compensating for a shortcoming. Oh, I have plenty of shortcomings. We're not going to talk about that. One thing of note is a concerted effort to avoid the use of a straight edge as much as possible. Obviously, straight edge was used for the borders. The ellipse on this is messed up. I don't know if it's... Yeah. And I will use a flexible curve for this, just to make sure that the line is consistent from where it breaks here, here, and here. That, and I might sneeze. Make a mess of it. Anyway, thank you for watching.